Welcome again to students of Baverstock Academy and Baverstock in the City. Before we look at this video, I would like to remind you that you can pause or rewind the video whenever you want to. Also, everything that is in this video is in your workbook. If you haven't got a workbook, then please ask your teacher for one. As you know, the Petrescu family have recently arrived in Birmingham from Romania. Stefan, the dad, Eleanor, the mum, and their two children, Maria and Paul. Maria and Paul are twins, and they're both aged 10. Last time we looked at how Paul completed a form. Here is the form that Paul completed. He put his family name, Petrescu, his first name, Paul. He has another name, Victor. We know that he is a boy, and we know that he is aged 10, and his address is 88 Stratford Street, Spark Hill, Birmingham, postcode B114QI, and his telephone number is there for us to read. Now we learn that Eleanor and Maria have also filled in some forms, but they have made some mistakes. The forms that Eleanor and Maria have to complete are slightly different to the form that Paul had to fill in. One of the differences is this here that states please complete in block capitals. This simply means that every letter has to be a capital letter or uppercase if you're using a word processor, and each letter has to be separated from the next letter. I'd like you to spend just a few moments having a look at Maria's completed form and see if you can spot the errors that she has made. I'm sure you've spotted some of her mistakes, but let's have a look now at the corrected form and see if you spotted the same ones that I spotted. I think you may have noticed that where Maria was asked to fill in her surname, she actually wrote her first name, and it wasn't in block capitals as is instructed on the form. This is what it should look like over here. Petrescu. You probably noticed that where it asked for Maria's first name, she put Petrescu, and we know that is not correct. However, it was in capital letters, which is good. It should, though, have said Maria, as it says over here. She put that she was a male, and we know she's a female, so we needed to put the tick there. She is aged 10, she got that correct, so we don't have to do anything there. However, when we look here, you will see that she's written Stratford in capital letters, she's written street not in capital letters, and she has written 88 at the end of the street address instead of it being at the beginning. It should have said 88 Stratford Street, as we have over here. She correctly wrote Spark Hill in capital letters, and it is spelt correctly, so we don't have to do any corrections there. She's identified her town as Birmingham, but she didn't write it in capital letters, so we do need the correction over here in capital letters. Both her postcode and her telephone number are incomplete. It should be B114QI for her postcode, and her telephone number needs the dialing code of Birmingham added at the front of the rest of the number. Your first task of this video is that I would like you to have a look at Eleanor's form and write the correct information in the space at the side of the form in your workbook. You need to look at this form very, very carefully because there is a mistake that you might not notice at first. We're now going to look at something a little different. The Petrescu family live in a street. They live in Stratford Street, but there are different types of streets, for example, road or avenue, etc. Each have abbreviations or shortened forms, and it's useful to know these for when you have to complete a form, write an address on an envelope, or find a street in a street map of the local area. We will have a look at this street map shortly. What we have here are most of the different kinds of road names that you will come across and their abbreviated form. One point that you do need to know is that these abbreviated or shortened forms of the words do not have a spoken pronunciation. They are only used when writing. So if you had to fill in a form, for example, or write an envelope that you were going to send to somebody, you might use the abbreviated forms there. Only ever are they used in writing and never in spoken form. You use the full road name for the spoken form. They are pretty straightforward, but you do need to familiarise yourself with them so that you can recognise them when, for example, you have to look at a street map and find a particular street or avenue or drive. You need to be able to identify what the abbreviated form is. So, for example, the abbreviation for avenue is AVE, the abbreviation for drive is DR, and perhaps over this side the abbreviation for walk is WK. Now, what you've probably noticed already is that one road name and the abbreviation is in red, and it says Saint. And this is a special one because you won't see that at the end of the name of the road. For example, the street where Stephen and Eleanor and Maria and Paul live is called Stratford Street, and the word street is at the end of the name of that road. This here will be at the beginning of the name of the road. For example, St. Peter Street. You wouldn't write the full name Saint, you would write the abbreviated form. For example, you might have to write St. Peter's Avenue, and you'd write it like this. So Saint is abbreviated to ST. You won't get that mixed up with the abbreviation for street because this, as you see here, is at the beginning of the street name. And when you see ST at the beginning of the street name, you know that that stands for Saint. Let's have a look at some of the shortened or abbreviated names of streets on this map of Birmingham city centre. If we look at the top here, we will see Regent Place, PL being the abbreviation for place. If we look on this left-hand side over here, we will see Camden Drive, DR being the abbreviated form for drive. If we look in the middle, we will see George Street, ST being the abbreviated form of street. Now, I'm sure if you look at this map for a little bit longer, you will find other examples of abbreviated names of roads. This map is in your workbook, so you can spend as long as you like looking at it. Your next task is to write the following addresses which have been abbreviated or shortened in full. You'll do this task in your workbook, and I hope that you will also use this form that we've already looked at today to help you do it. On this form that we can see here, you will notice that Stefan has filled in his personal information in column B. In your workbook, I would like you to fill in your personal information in column C. What you will see here is a form that contains all the possible variations that you might come across when you are asked to complete a form that asks for your personal information. For example, as you know, family name, surname and last name mean the same thing. But you do need to know those terms because they might be in a form that you are asked to complete. Your next task, again to be done in your workbook, is to complete the form below with your personal information. This is an example of a straightforward form, but once you have filled it in, it will contain most of the information about yourself. So far we have been looking at written English, and this is often very different to spoken English. We will look at some of these differences here. For example, you wouldn't see "what's your last name" written on a form. It would always say surname or last name or family name. Similarly, it wouldn't be very polite to say age to someone. You would much more likely to say, "How old are you?" These sentences at the bottom here are often very useful. For example, you might have to say to someone, "Could you spell that please?" if they told you the name of a street that perhaps you'd never heard of before. Or maybe you didn't hear them very clearly and you might have to say, "Could you say that again please?" Or another way of saying that would be, "Could you repeat that please?" Your next task will again be done in your workbook. And if you look at the column B of this form here, you will see that there are jumbled words. And your task is to unjumble these words and write the unjumbled version in the space provided in your workbook. This is not a difficult task if you look for the clues. For example, the first word of the question or any sentence will always begin with a capital letter. If you look here, you will see the word how, and you will see that that begins with a capital letter, and you therefore know that that will be the first word of your question. Because these are questions, the very end of the question will always be a question mark, one of these. So where you see that, that will go at the very end of your question. You do that for all 7 of the jumbled sentences in column B. When you've done that, you match the questions in column B with the words in column A. You might have noticed by now that column B contains the spoken version and column A contains the written version of information that you might ask somebody. I've done the first one for you, so let's have a look at what we've done. We've unjumbled it to say, "How old are you?" Now we know that refers to age. So what I want you to do now is to transfer 1 from column B into column A against the entry age. What you might find helpful is that once you have used a question from column B, it might be useful for you to actually cross that number out because you won't use it again. So we'll do that now. You won't use that question number again. And for your final task, you are now going to work in pairs. You will complete a form which you'll find in your workbook by asking your partner some questions about him or herself. When you have done this, your partner will ask you some questions so that he or she will be able to complete a form with details about you. So that you can complete the form about your partner, you need to remind yourself of the questions you need to ask him or her. These are the questions that we looked at earlier, and you will see that they are in your workbook so that you can refer back to them whenever you need to. This is the form that you will use to fill in your partner's personal information. You should do this in your workbook. Remember to ask your partner the questions that we looked at earlier. Remember also that if you do not understand a question, you can always say, "Can you say that again, please?" Also remember that your teacher is there to help you if you get stuck. Finally, remember that you can pause or rewind the video at any time. Good luck.